Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be on the stage. I was going to begin my presentation by saying that the future of coffee is Robusta, and you all need to invest in Robusta. But then David, Dr. Aaron Davies already told you that that wasn't the case. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to say up here today. But I think the main point is that there should be room in specialty coffee for all the coffees that we love, be them wild species or be it Robusta in my case. So let's start the conversations on how to make room in specialty coffee for species like Robusta. As Hannah kindly introduced right now, my name is Emi-Beth Aku Quantson, and I'm from Ghana. It's in West Africa, and it's a vibrant, bustling country that is known for its production of cocoa, and also being one of the most hospitable countries on the West African coast. Between us and our neighbors, Ivory Coast, we produce more than 60% of the world's cocoa. So if you've had a bar of chocolate, you've probably already tasted some of the goodness that can come from Ghana. And now we would like to shift those learnings into coffee. The history of Robusta coffee is not entirely documented. But if you would listen to Mr. Fadi, who, as you can see, is a very good storyteller, we were enthralled by his story, the early seedlings of Robusta were brought into Ghana in 1930s by the Germans from our neighboring country, Togo. They were brought into the Volta region, which has the highest mountains, some of the best altitudes, and rolling streams in Ghana. And the people of Leklebi, as you see here, had been planting coffee since the 1930s. They even roasted the coffee in open pans and drank their own coffee. But in 1964 Ghana, the coffee industry was liberalized, and a lot of coffee farmers opted to grow cocoa because there was already a market for it. And our coffee industry was neglected. So today I'm going to tell you a bit about my own journey into coffee and how you, as coffee professionals, can also benefit from the changes and shifts in specialty coffee. So being here is a full circle moment for me. I first heard about the SCA through a mentor, through my mentor, Rob, who knew Roger and Carol of Quartermain's Coffee in Bethesda. He approached them to ask them for some tips on how I can avoid some common pitfalls in starting my sustainable coffee company in Ghana. Roger and Carol, in turn, asked him to ask me if I'd heard about the SCA. And the SCA was a good starting point for anybody who wanted to enter coffee. This was in 2014. You see, I'd spent the last 6 years as a chartered accountant and tax consultant in a Big Four accounting firm. And I was looking at how to re-enter coffee. My first foray into coffee was in university, at Ashesi University in Ghana, where I had started a cafe and run it successfully for 2 years before and in tandem with working in corporate. But I, like many others at the time, did not even know Ghana had coffee, Robusta coffee. And of course, my cafe did not serve specialty coffee. So in 2014, I packed my bags. It was great that I already had a US visa, and I had some savings to afford a ticket. And I made my way over to SCA in Seattle. The only way I could attend was to volunteer. Being a volunteer meant that I felt more of a part of SCA, not just an observer or an attendee, but really part of the organization of the conference. I volunteered for latte art classes, and I can tell you I changed out more milk and water than I'd like to remember. I also got to see cool Starbucks people and visit the Nespresso tent that featured George Clooney. So I was convinced that coffee people were cool people, and this was what I would like to do. So I returned to Ghana and started the pop-up cafe in the co-working space, Kawa Moka. I started by buying roasted retail coffee on our shelves, noting that most of the coffee on our retail shelves were from countries that didn't even produce coffee. We brewed coffee on our espresso machine. It was quite an investment. And we were able to sell to customers who had bemoaned the lack of filtered coffee in our West African region. In tandem, I also applied for the Coffee Skills program with the SCA. And I was able to start learning more about, brewing and roasting and the like. I also applied for the fellowship program. And yesterday, in the fellows room, it brought back a lot of fond memories, and it reminded me how interconnected our experiences in coffee are and how we need to share more with each other. I then applied for the fellowship program, which was proudly sponsored by S&D Coffee and Tea, now West Rock. And I had the opportunity to visit my first, commercial roasting facility. I was blown away. It gave me also a good opportunity to coffee crawl and visit some progressive companies like Pure Intentions in North Carolina. It was a good experience. From there, I also was able to join the Coffee Roasters Guild Leadership Committee, and that has brought me full circle in coffee. So for me to be here is very exciting, and it's a reminder that even as we make strides to include other people that would ordinarily not have the opportunity to be in coffee, we can also extend that to coffee species and relatively unknown coffee origins like Ghana in West Africa. So what is the argument for Robusta in specialty coffee anyway? I'd like to introduce you to Betty. Betty is one of our coffee farmers. With her permission, Betty has asked me to tell you a little bit about her story. Betty didn't have the opportunity to finish university or to go to university. She finished secondary school. And this was because of economic hardships of her family. And yet, Betty's family has 3 coffee farms of about 2 acres each. So why should it be that she is not able to further her education because of that? Every year, and today as well in the panel, we hear about some of the crises for specialty coffee. Some of these include that 57% of coffee produced is produced by 2 countries. Some of the solutions that have been provided are by creating artificial environments to grow Arabica and reducing the number of people growing Arabica such that benefits could be more impactful. And perhaps, if all fails, to think about paying a bit more to keep people in coffee. But here's an alternative thought. There are already existing Robusta farmers like Betty. It would be great to be able to give them the necessary tools to be able to bridge the gap between what consumers want and what farmers are producing, pricing. The second alternative thought is that 75% of the coffee that is produced is being brewed by 5 countries. But this narrative is changing. Producing countries are beginning to drink their own coffee. And this provides a unique opportunity for us in this room because the time is ripe more than ever to invest in that global coffee chain. The coffee chains in Ghana have seen the brewing of our local Robusta, and they're able to compete with some of the cafes that serve Arabica. It's quite interesting to see consumers drink Robusta and have good feedback on what they're tasting. Some of the descriptions we've heard are it's chocolatey, it's nutty, and it has a kick. It's very bold. So we're already drinking Robusta. It already contributes to more than 40% of the world's coffee exports. So why don't we spend a little bit more time investing in connecting the gap between the consumers and the producers such that they can also benefit. They already have the arable land for it, and they already have the tools which can help them bridge that gap. You can see here the impact of us drinking our own coffee. You'll find that from 2015 to 2020, the exports of coffee in Ghana have dipped. And that's primarily because the data on coffee from Ghana is based on exports. Between the coffee price and our coffee being consumed locally, you'll find that there's less coffee to grow out. But we still have arable land to produce. So why do I say that the Robusta is the future of coffee? It's a taste we already know. It has flavor notes that are liked and sought after, even if we wouldn't admit it. And there's already arable land and farmers to meet the projected shortfall. So what if I told you that one of the main reasons that Robusta is not accepted in specialty is because of a disconnect between what the consumers want and what the producers are doing? Our good friends at CQI took a sample of our coffee for testing. Note here that there's no coffee lab that is testing Robusta coffee in Ghana. Our samples had to travel overseas to be tested. Imagine our surprise when it came back with a score of 83. Why were we able to achieve this score? Because I, through the SCA programs, had been able to understand coffee defects. I'd been able to understand what a clean cup required and was able to clean those samples for testing. What would happen if this could be done on a large scale? What would happen if our farmers understood that this is what was needed for Robusta to be consumed globally and perhaps even accepted in specialty coffee? Superior grade coffee in Ghana is judged by this criteria. This is from the Ghana Cocoa Board, the regulatory authority. You'll find fair grade, you'll have substandard, and you'll see that there's a mismatch between this criteria for export and for specialty coffee. So for our Robusta farmers, they can sell black beans. They can sell broken beans. So what is the incentive for them to bridge that gap and produce coffee that can meet specialty quality standards? They've started seeing the returns locally with the rise of coffee companies in Ghana. But what if we can expand this and make it more acceptable to you? The good news is there's already a lot of work that has been done in Ghana. The government of Ghana in 2010 initiated a coffee rehabilitation program that looked to increase production to 100,000 tons by 2024. This has already increased land under cultivation from 2,500 hectares to 4,500 hectares with an average of 2 tons per hectare produced. It also means that the Cocoa Board and CRIG, which is our Cocoa Research Institute, are looking for varietals that are accepted and wanted for specialty coffee. So there are already a lot of interventions that are happening on the ground. There's strategic support from various organizations to encourage organic farming and fair trade certifications. And most excitingly, we have organizations like ITC, IACO, and ACRAM that are on the ground training our farmers on what they can do to improve the quality of the cup from our Robusta coffee. I think for me, one of the most interesting sessions was when we had the farmers' cup green coffee that had been roasted and ripe coffee. And they would taste the green coffee and they'd like squeeze their faces. And then, they began to understand that this is why you shouldn't pluck, green coffee. Wait for it to ripen. This is why you need to collect it in a hygienic environment and make sure that it's not contaminated by processing. The more they understand, the better the quality of cup. And the better the quality of cup, the more potential that Robusta has to satisfy the specialty coffee requirements. CQI is also heavily involved in trying to improve the quality of coffee that comes from Ghana. This is a picture of us from training. So this represents some of the exporters, producers in Ghana that were going through the training. So how can we, as a collective, help Robusta take its rightful place? Let's judge Robusta on its own merits. We're not trying to produce a coffee that tastes like Arabica. We are trying to produce better tasting Robusta, which is liked for its own unique flavors. So even as we cup Robusta, let's recognize that and be open to the potential that Robusta holds on its own. If you're a coffee buyer, let's look into how we can increase the volume of production of Robusta for you. Engage us. Let's have that conversation. What do you need? And how can we bridge that gap such that what we're producing is what you could potentially want? And most of all, CQI, Akram, and Ayako are in the room today. If you see them, engage them. And let's see how we can bring some of the expertise that is sitting in this room to origins like Ghana, such that we can begin to bridge the gap on what is needed for specialty coffee. Thank you very much.